This is a preview video for hydration and volume regulation. So we're going to continue on the topics of the kidney, osmolarity, fluid balance, and a little bit about pH too. So osmolarity, we're going to talk about hormones like ADH. For fluid volume, we're going to talk about hormones aldosterone and atrial natriuretic peptide, some important enzymes and signaling hormones. We'll also talk about how all this relates to treatment of hypertension, and then we'll finish up with pH. So osmolarity of your body's fluid is really the concentration of ions and molecules that are dissolved in the fluid of your body. The extracellular fluid and the plasma is what's really regulated. And so osmolarity relates to the concentration of all these dissolved particles. So normal osmolarity in the body is about 300. You can either be too dilute or too concentrated. Too dilute would be decreased osmolarity. Too concentrated would be increased osmolarity. In either case, this is bad. The cells in your body, if the osmolarity is too low, can swell up by gaining water. And if your body's osmolarity is too high, the cells can lose their water and shrink. And again, these are not good for your cells, so we want to keep an osmolarity in the normal range. So if your osmolarity is too low, you need to get rid of some of that excess water, or you could add solutes. The easiest way is really just to pee out water. If your osmolarity is too concentrated, too high, you need to add water, and so you also don't want to be peeing out a lot of water. And so you usually get thirsty and you stop peeing out water and you drink water. And again, both of these situations, you want to go back to normal osmolarity and homeostasis. So let's look at an example where you're dehydrated. If you're dehydrated, you're losing water through sweat and evaporation, and your osmolarity then goes up because you've lost water, right? So we're going to be too concentrated and our osmolarity is high. In that case, again, what was that caused by? Water loss. The goal will be to get back to normal osmolarity. The way you would do that is to get more water in the body. So what we can do is, this is sensed in the hypothalamus by neurons, and they secrete a hormone called antidiuretic hormone. And it kind of tells you what it does with its name. But one thing it does is make you more thirsty by affecting your hypothalamus and the brain. And so hopefully you drink more water, and that helps return your osmolarity back to normal. If you don't have access to water, the other thing that'll happen is ADH goes to your little collecting duct cells and increases their water reabsorption so that you're not peeing out water and instead keeping that water in your body, which helps, again, bring your osmolarity back to normal. We want to decrease our osmolarity. So when ADH is around, you decrease your urine output, and the pee that you do make, the urine that you do make, is very, very concentrated. Let's look at the opposite of this situation. You drink a bunch of water, which has relatively few ions. So essentially you're adding water to the body that decreases your osmolarity or makes your body concentration too dilute. In that case, those neurons in the hypothalamus stop releasing or slow the release of ADH. That then tells those collecting duct cells to go ahead and let the water go, decrease water reabsorption, and you begin peeing out a lot of urine, and that urine turns out to be very dilute, much like the water that you ingested. So you get rid of a lot of urine that's very dilute or low osmolarity. Again, if you think about this, you won't be as thirsty and you won't drink as much water, and this should all return your osmolarity back to normal. And one way to think about this is, so you return your osmolarity back towards normal. Basically, the urine starts looking a lot like what you've ingested and what you want to get rid of. So what does ADH actually do when it reaches the kidneys? It targets the collecting duct. So all the parts of the nephron, the proximal convoluted tubule, reabsorbs water. The loop of Henle reabsorbs water, and most of it's already reabsorbed there. But the amount that's left to reabsorb in the collecting duct, about 10% of the water, is actually under control of ADH. When ADH is around, those little collecting duct cells make little and insert little water channels into their membrane, and water is able to pass out of the filtrate, be reabsorbed into the body. We call those water channels aquaporins. They're just proteins, and they allow water to pass into the collecting duct cells and then back into your capillaries, and that's water reabsorption. Again, the more ADH, the more water reabsorption. The less ADH, the less water reabsorption. If there's not much ADH around, then you won't reabsorb much water, and the water will pass out into your urine be excreted. So again, the osmolarity in the body affects your ADH levels, affecting the collecting duct. Okay, so to review, you ingest a bunch of water, your plasma osmolarity goes down, the neurons stop releasing or slow the release of ADH from the posterior pituitary. ADH is made in the hypothalamus and released in the posterior pituitary. The ADH targets your kidneys. When you have decreased ADH, you'll have more urine output, more urine flow, and the urine will look a lot like the water you're ingesting, so it'll have a low osmolarity. So you drink water and you pee a lot. If you don't need that water in your body will just get rid of it. Here's an example where we've done that in a study with students. We had them drink, say, about 1.5 liters to 2 liters of water or different fluids, and then we looked at their urine output for 2 hours. So you drink 2 liters of water, takes about 15 minutes to drink that water, and then we measure your urine output for 2 hours. Do you think you'll pee it all out? Will you keep it? Well, for water, again, 2 hours, collect their urine, you collect that amount, and you divide it by the amount of volume that they drank. So say you drank 2 liters, and you peed out 2 liters in that 2 hours, that would be 100% of that fluid was excreted. And it turns out for students that drank water, about 85% of the fluid that they drank was excreted in 2 hours. So they didn't need to keep much of that fluid in their body. Again, why not? Because it was changing their osmolarity when they drank that water. They didn't need that water, and so their body suppressed ADH secretion, and they got rid of that urine. In some other conditions, though, if you don't change the osmolarity much, you won't pee as much out. Or if you're dehydrated, you'll keep that in your body. Okay, let's switch to regulation of fluid volume. So say you lose a lot of blood. If you lose a lot of blood, that's going to decrease your arterial blood pressure, and you're going to want to help bring arterial blood pressure back up. Let's say another situation that we already looked at, let's say you're dehydrated and you sweat a lot of water. Again, that's going to decrease your fluid volume. All these things, both of these things, would decrease your blood pressure. And there's other examples. You might have diarrhea or heart failure. All these things can decrease your blood pressure. One of the ways we can help bring our blood pressure back up is to increase or bring our fluid volume back up in our body. So when you decrease your blood pressure, one of the things is your brain responds and detects that through the carotids, sending signals back to your brain, and you activate the sympathetic nervous system. And that releases norepinephrine to your kidney, and also you decrease renal blood flow just because your blood pressure is lower. Both of these things, these two things, activate the production of an enzyme in your kidneys called renin, or renin. I like to say renin. Renin converts a protein floating around in your blood to angiotensin 1. Another enzyme is going to convert angiotensin 1 floating around in your blood into an active hormone called angiotensin 2. The enzyme that does that is called ACE, or ACE for short. So ACE actually turns angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2, so it's called angiotensin converting enzyme. And these two sets of enzymes basically help in this low blood pressure situation increase the levels of angiotensin 2. And what does angiotensin 2 do for you? Well, one of the things that it does is it goes and signals to the adrenal glands and tells the adrenal glands to release another hormone called aldosterone. So angiotensin 2 went up because their blood pressure was low, and now aldosterone goes up because of angiotensin 2. So we've got these two important hormones, and we'll want to talk about their actions next, angiotensin 2 and aldosterone. So angiotensin 2. First, it goes to the adrenal gland and increases the secretion of aldosterone. Aldosterone targets the kidneys and those little nephron cells in the distal convoluted tubule to increase salt reabsorption and also indirectly water reabsorption, which both help to increase our fluid volume and then help our blood pressure. Turns out angiotensin 2 also is a vasoconstrictor, and it increases TPR by telling those arterioles and veins to constrict. It also tells your brain that you feel thirsty so that you drink water and hopefully add some more water back to your body. All these things together are helping to increase your fluid volume to bring your blood pressure back up to normal, which was what initially caused this whole problem. So again, this cascade is pretty complex. It begins with renin secretion from the kidney because your blood pressure was low. And then ACE is around in the lung and the kidney and really capillaries all over the body. And that turns that angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 is this very active and important hormone which can circulate all over the body. Of course, angiotensin 2 goes to the adrenal gland and tells the adrenal gland secrete aldosterone. Aldosterone then goes to the kidneys and targets salt and water reabsorption to help replenish your fluid volume. And yes, you are complex. So this is a complex pathway, but one of the things that it does is important is to increase aldosterone. When aldosterone's high, it tells your kidney little nephrons in the cells to actually reabsorb sodium. And so reabsorption of sodium decreases your excretion of sodium. That also helps with reabsorption of water indirectly. And again, we're reabsorbing that fluid and adding it back to our body, and that helps with our fluid volume and helps with our blood pressure. And so that's aldosterone. We've already learned about blood pressure when we learned about cardiovascular system. If your blood pressure ever gets low, you know that there's some direct effects where you activate your sympathetic nervous system to increase heart rate and contractility, and also TPR by causing vasoconstriction. So you can activate the little SA node to increase your heart rate, the ventricles to increase the pounding of your heart, and that will help bring up your blood pressure. The kidneys, a little slower response, but the renin-angiotensin 2 aldosterone system, or series of signals, will actually help increase your blood pressure too more slowly by increasing fluid volume, TPR, and thirst. So together, all of these things act together to regulate your arterial blood pressure. Some more quickly, right? The autonomic nervous system responds fairly quickly, heart rate, contractility, and TPR. Renin, angiotensin 2, and aldosterone take a little more time, but that helps bring up your fluid volume and regulate your blood pressure as well. Okay, let's look at a different situation where actually now your body becomes fluid overloaded. So all of a sudden you have too much fluid in your body. So this example is somebody hooks up a saline bag to you and gives you too much saline that also includes water and salt. That's adding more volume to your body. It's not changing your osmolarity, but it is increasing your blood volume. When you do that, you stretch your heart more, and your little myocytes actually release their own hormone called atrial natriuretic peptide. Some other places release this, but mainly it's the atria. And that ANP is going to target, among other organs, the kidneys and help to increase urine output so that your fluid volume goes down, your blood volume goes down, and you correct your blood pressure. So again, this is a different way that you're going to regulate urine output through atrial natriuretic peptide. You're going to pee out a lot of salt and a lot of water, and that's going to hopefully get rid of any excess fluid volume. You may have experienced, if you've ever sat in a pool long enough, do you ever get the urge to pee in the pool? Well, it's actually a physiological response. The water pressure pushes on your fluid in your body, which increases the venous constriction. You get a lot of increase in your blood pressure, which stimulates the heart to release atrial natriuretic peptide. Again, that targets the kidney so that you start peeing a lot. You pee out excess salt and excess water, which decreases your fluid volume and corrects your blood pressure. And that's why you get the urge to pee in the pool, and you actually are peeing out that extra salt and extra water because of the fluid pressure in the pool. And it takes about 15 to 20 minutes, and you'll actually increase your urine output. You also have a compensatory decrease in renin, angiotensin 2, and aldosterone when you're in the swimming pool as well. So again, some powerful responses that are affecting your kidney in that case. All right. One of the things that are important, because we have a lot of people with hypertension, and so we can take advantage of these different strategies to reduce your blood pressure, taking advantage of what we understand regulating the heart, blood vessels, and even the kidney, and these different pathways to reduce your blood pressure. So we can target the nephrons and the little cells in the nephron, all to reduce your blood pressure. So let's look at a couple examples. So beta blockers actually are drugs that block the effects of norepinephrine actions on the heart, and mainly the heart. And so beta blockers decrease heart rate, and decrease contractility, which are the actions of norepinephrine, right? So if you block norepinephrine, you decrease heart rate, you decrease contractility, and you decrease your blood pressure. Another type of drug that's used commonly are ACE inhibitors. Remember, ACE catalyzes is an enzyme that creates the reaction of Ang2. Angiotensin 2 increases aldosterone, increases TPR. So if you block ACE, you block Ang2, you block aldosterone, and you block its effect on TPR, which would, of course, decrease your blood pressure. And both of those drugs are pretty popular. Beta blockers and ACE inhibitors are very common in people over the age of 50 to reduce their blood pressure. An older one and very powerful decrease in blood pressure medication would be loop diuretics. Loop diuretics specifically target the loop of Henle. That's why they're called loop diuretics. And the loop of Henle's job is to reabsorb water and salt. And so if you block the loop of Henle with the loop diuretics, you don't reabsorb that water and you don't reabsorb that salt, and you end up peeing it out. And so these are very powerful. If you take loop diuretics, you end up peeing a lot, getting rid of that salt and that water, which is what causes your blood pressure to go down. So that would be the opposite of what usually acts to keep your blood pressure up, which would be that signaling pathway, the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone, or in the case of loop diuretics, targeting the loop of Henle. Okay, the final learning objective is pH regulation. So remember, pH in your body, it's the hydrogen ions floating around that determine the pH. And the more hydrogen ions you have, the lower your pH is. So as we add more and more hydrogen ions to this fluid that could represent the fluid in our body or our blood, the pH goes down. The pH of your blood is about 7.4, pretty close to neutral. Anything above 7 is considered basic, and anything below 7 is considered acidic. So if we had too much hydrogen ion in our body, our blood pH and our fluid pH would go down, would become more acidic. We could call that acidosis. The job of the kidney then would be to get rid of that excess acid and get rid of those hydrogen ions. And luckily our kidney can secrete hydrogen ions, those little cells in the nephron, and then they basically send those hydrogens out in your urine and increase the hydrogen ion excretion, which makes your urine more acidic. So again, your body was too acidic, you pee it out, and we pee that hydrogen ion out as acid in our urine. Okay, to think about pH, we got to get a little more complicated than hydrogen ions. We need to add bicarbonate. Bicarbonate is a chemical which can react with hydrogen ions and basically buffer or make that little hydrogen ion disappear. And so it does that through a chemical reaction. So hydrogen ions can be buffered by bicarbonate. So not only do hydrogen ion concentration affect your pH, but also bicarbonate concentration in your body. So the kidneys can reabsorb bicarbonate. So again, they're able to affect your pH not only by getting rid of hydrogen, but reabsorbing bicarbonate buffer. So let's look at an example. If you drink lots of cranberry juice is fairly acidic, you add a bunch of hydrogen ions to your body, that's going to decrease your pH because the hydrogen ions you added. It's also going to use up some of that bicarbonate buffer to keep your pH from changing too much. So remember, hydrogen combined with bicarbonate, which buffers or makes that little hydrogen disappear. So what's the kidney's response to this decreased pH in your body? Well, it's going to be to secrete more hydrogen ions in your urine and make your urine more acidic, so lower pH. And it's also going to reabsorb more bicarbonate, because if you keep bicarbonate in the body, that can bind up or buffer little hydrogen ions. And again, that'll help increase your pH back to normal. So the goal was to increase our pH back to normal by getting rid of hydrogen ions and increasing the amount of bicarbonate buffer. And so hopefully that changes the body's pH. Usually your diet will affect your urine. So if your diet's very acidic, your urine will be acidic. If your diet's very basic, your urine will be basic. Okay, so pH balance really depends on the little hydrogen ions floating around and the bicarbonate ions floating around in your body's fluids. And luckily, your kidney can secrete hydrogen ions and reabsorb bicarbonate ions. So in this way, our kidney helps us in keeping our pH balanced in our body by changing hydrogen secretion and bicarbonate reabsorption. Okay, so let's get a little complex here. We're going to look at pH regulation involving the lungs and the kidneys. So let's say, for example, your lungs' job is to get rid of CO2, and so remember, CO2 can react with water to create bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. Hydrogen ions change your pH. So if the lungs ever aren't working correctly, like COPD, sometimes the CO2 can go up in your body, which increases hydrogen ions and decreases your body pH, makes you more acidic. So how can the kidneys help? Well, the kidneys, again, can secrete hydrogen ions and help return your pH back to normal, and they can also regulate bicarbonate ions. So again, the lungs are causing a problem with your body's pH, and your kidneys are going to help. So how can the kidneys help? Secrete those excess hydrogen ions made by the CO2, and it does that into the urine. And it takes a little while to do this, but it definitely can help, and it'll help bring your pH back up to normal. The other thing is the kidney can reabsorb more bicarbonate, and the bicarbonate can help buffer those excess hydrogen ions in your body's fluids. Again, it soaks up those little hydrogen ions, essentially makes them disappear. All of these things will bring your pH up, hopefully, maybe not perfectly to normal, but closer to normal. So if you had COPD and CO2, made your pH become abnormal, your body can help, your kidneys can help bring it back towards normal. So maybe you were down at 7.25 and it'll bring it back up to 7.3. Let's look at another example that you could actually have happen too in life. If you go snowboarding at altitude, say 10,000 feet or above, there's less oxygen in the atmosphere, less oxygen molecules, and so you have to breathe lots more to get extra oxygen. But you're also breathing off more CO2 than you're making, and so suddenly you're breathing off lots of CO2. You have less CO2 in your body, so you have less hydrogen ions through that chemical reaction, and that makes the pH of your blood in your body actually go up. So again, how can our kidneys help? Well, one is to decrease the secretion of hydrogen ions and decrease the reabsorption of bicarbonate. How will that help our pH go back up? Or our pH go back down? Well, you'll have more hydrogen ions floating around, and you'll have less buffer floating around. So the take-home message is the lungs help regulate pH by CO2 levels, and hopefully your lungs are working well and they'll do their job. And the kidneys can help regulate pH by regulating hydrogen ion secretion and also bicarbonate reabsorption. So together, both of those systems help regulate your pH. The lungs are really fast and the kidneys are a little slower, but they both help to regulate your pH. And yes, peeing is important because we're able to keep things in or get rid of things. So that's the end. That was the kidneys. Hopefully that makes sense. We'll have time to answer questions in class. Work on the practice exam, and I'll see you in class. And check out I Heart Guts. See you guys.